I am Brenton, 34, a guy who built an app development company from scratch after leaving my hometown 10 years ago. When my grandfather died 6 months ago, I lost more than family, I lost my biggest supporter. Last weekend, my sister Amanda invited me to dinner at her house, supposedly to reconnect after years of distance. Little did I know this dinner would expose a betrayal that had been brewing for years. I had spent months preparing for this moment, gathering evidence that would change everything. Before I tell you what happened at that dinner, let me know where you're watching from and hit that like and subscribe button. Trust me, you'll want to see how I turned the tables on my family's betrayal. Growing up, my grandfather was my rock. After my parents divorced when I was 8, he stepped in and became the father figure I desperately needed. My sister Amanda and I were raised primarily by our mom, but we spent weekends and summers at Grandpa Joe's house, right behind his hardware store, Carpenter's Corner. That store was his pride and joy, a fixture in our community for over 40 years. Amanda and I took different paths early on. She was always the golden child, straight-A student debate team captain, class president. I was more of a hands-on learner. While Amanda was winning academic awards, I was helping Grandpa in the store, learning about tools, fixing things, and eventually teaching myself to code on the old computer in the back office. My parents and Amanda never really understood my fascination with technology. Waste of time, my dad would say during his occasional visits. You should focus on real skills, my mom would echo. Amanda would smirk, showing off another perfect report card while my grades were average at best. Only Grandpa Joe saw potential in my tech experiments. Brenton, my boy, he would say, his calloused hand on my shoulder, you see things differently. That's a gift, not a problem. This world is changing, and you understand that better than any of us. When I was 24, I made the decision to leave for Silicon Valley. My family was unanimously against it. Mom cried. Dad called me irresponsible, and Amanda, fresh out of law school and starting at a prestigious firm, lectured me about throwing my life away on computer games. Only Grandpa supported me. The night before I left, he slipped me an envelope with $5,000, his savings from the store. Make something that matters, he whispered as he hugged me goodbye. Those early years in California were brutal. I lived in a tiny apartment with 3 roommates, worked odd jobs, and coded late into the night. But slowly things started coming together. My first app was a simple tool for small business inventory management, inspired by the outdated system Grandpa used at the hardware store. It caught on with local businesses, then gained traction nationally. By the time I turned 30, my company Build Bridge Apps had 27 employees and was valued at several $1 million. I had finally made it. Through all the struggles and victories, I called Grandpa every Sunday without fail. He never quite understood what I actually did, but he was endlessly proud. My grandson, the computer genius, he would tell anyone who would listen at the store. My relationship with the rest of my family remained distant. I sent birthday and Christmas gifts, made obligatory calls on holidays, but there was always an undercurrent of resentment. They saw my success as luck rather than the result of hard work and risk-taking. Amanda, now a corporate attorney specializing in mergers and acquisitions, would send periodic emails with links to articles about tech bubbles and startup failures. About a year ago, Grandpa's health began to decline. Our Sunday calls grew shorter as his energy waned. I offered to come visit, but he always brushed it off. No need to interrupt your important work, son. I'm just moving a bit slower these days. I should have insisted. I should have recognized the changes in his voice, the increasing confusion, the way our conversations became repetitive. I was busy with a major product launch, and I thought there would be more time. Then came the call from my mother 6 months ago. Grandpa had passed away in his sleep. I flew home immediately for the funeral, numb with grief and regret. The funeral was well attended. Grandpa had been beloved in the community. I stood awkwardly with my family, feeling like an outsider. Amanda organized everything, of course. She spoke eloquently about Grandpa's dedication to family and community, choking up at all the right moments. Our parents looked at her with such pride. Nobody asked me to speak. After the service, we gathered at the family lawyer's office for the reading of the will. I wasn't concerned about inheritance. I had more money than I needed. I assumed Grandpa would divide things fairly between Amanda and me with perhaps special items for other family members. The shock came when Mr. Peterson, the family lawyer, revealed that Grandpa had left the hardware store, his most prized possession, entirely to Amanda. There was a small monetary bequest to me, but the store, which Grandpa had always talked about as my future inheritance, was now completely in my sister's control. There must be some mistake, I said, stunned. Grandpa always told me the store would be mine someday. Amanda's face tightened. Well, he changed his mind. He realized the store should go to someone who actually stayed in town, who visited him regularly, who cared enough to be present. Our parents nodded in agreement, and Mr. Peterson looked uncomfortable but confirmed that the will had been properly executed and witnessed. I left town the next day confused and hurt. Something felt very wrong. Grandpa and I had spoken about the store just months before, and he had reiterated his plan to leave it to me. He knew I had ideas about modernizing while preserving its character. It made no sense that he would change his mind without even mentioning it. Over the following weeks, I couldn't shake my suspicions. I hired a private investigator to look into Grandpa's last months. What emerged was disturbing. According to the store employees, Amanda had suddenly become a fixture at the store about 3 months before Grandpa's death, despite having shown little interest in it previously. She had taken control of his finances, restricted visitors at his home, and been present during all medical appointments. Most tellingly, the amended will had been signed just 2 weeks before his death, at a time when, according to his medical records, he was on strong medications that could affect his cognitive function. I spent 6 months building a case, gathering evidence, collecting statements from caregivers and store employees. I learned that Amanda had significant financial problems despite her impressive salary, bad investments, a too expensive house, and her husband Richard's failing real estate ventures had left them desperate for cash. Just as I was preparing to contest the will in court, I received a surprising email from Amanda. "It's been too long since we've all been together as a family. Please come to dinner at my house this Saturday. Time to heal old wounds." It was so unexpected that I nearly declined. But then I realized this might be my opportunity to confront them with what I knew. I accepted the invitation and packed my evidence file in my briefcase. Little did I know just how dramatically this family dinner would unfold. Amanda's house was exactly what you'd expect from someone desperate to project success. A sprawling colonial in the most expensive neighborhood in town, with manicured landscaping and a 3-car garage filled with luxury vehicles. As I parked my rental car in the circular driveway, I felt a knot forming in my stomach. It had been years since I'd seen my parents outside of Grandpa's funeral, and my last interaction with Amanda had been tense at best. I rang the doorbell, briefcase in hand, dressed in a simple but expensive charcoal suit. No need to be casual for what I anticipated would be anything but a casual family reunion. The door swung open to reveal Amanda Hare, perfectly styled, wearing a designer dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Brenton, so glad you could make it." She air-kissed my cheek, the scent of expensive perfume overwhelming. "Everyone's in the living room." I followed her through the marble-floored entryway into a living room that looked like it had been staged for a luxury real estate listing. My parents sat stiffly on a white leather sofa, both looking older than I remembered. Mom had colored her gray hair since the funeral, and Dad had lost weight, his golf shirt hanging loosely on his frame. "Brenton." My father stood, extending a hand rather than offering a hug. "Good to see you." My mother remained seated but offered a tight smile. "You look well. California must agree with you." Before I could respond, a tall man with salt and pepper hair entered the room carrying a tray of drinks. Amanda's husband, Richard. I'd met him only a couple of times over the years, most recently at the funeral. He was a real estate developer with a reputation for flashy projects that often ran into financial or regulatory troubles. The prodigal tech genius returns. Richard handed me a glass of scotch without asking my preference. "How's the app business?" "Still convincing people to pay for things they don't need." I forced a smile, taking the drink but not sipping it. "BuildBridge is doing well, thanks. We focus on tools that help small businesses compete in the digital marketplace." Amanda clapped her hands together. "Let's not talk business right away. Brenton, you remember our children, Taylor and Jordan? They're upstairs finishing homework. I've told them they can say hello quickly before going to their grandparents for the night. That was interesting. Shipping the kids off for what was supposed to be a family reconciliation dinner, it felt calculated, like Amanda was clearing the stage for whatever she had planned. On Q2, pre-teens appeared briefly, offered rehearsed greetings, and were ushered out the door by a waiting nanny. The house fell into an awkward silence once they left. Dinner should be ready shortly, Amanda announced. Our housekeeper prepared everything before leaving. I thought it would be nice to have complete privacy for our family reunion. More stage management. I was beginning to feel like I'd walked into a carefully orchestrated performance. The dining room continued the theme of conspicuous wealth, a massive table that could seat 12 set for just the 5 of us, fine china crystal glasses, and an elaborate floral centerpiece. We took our assigned seats with Amanda at the head of the table naturally. "I've prepared all your favorites," she said, though she had no idea what my favorites might be after so many years. "Let's start with a toast to family reconciliation." We raised our glasses, and I noticed my parents exchanging glances with Amanda. There was something rehearsed about all of this, a hidden script I wasn't privy to. I decided to play along and see where it led. The first course was served, an overpriced salad with ingredients I couldn't pronounce. The conversation remained superficial. Comments about the weather, bland questions about my life in California, and carefully edited updates about family members I barely remembered. "So Brenton," my mother finally ventured into slightly deeper waters, "do you ever think about moving back home? It would be nice to have both our children nearby again." Before I could answer, Amanda jumped in. "Oh, I'm sure Brenton's far too busy with his important tech work to consider returning to our little town." "Actually," I replied evenly, "I've been thinking about having a stronger presence here, especially with Grandpa gone. Someone needs to look after his legacy." A flicker of something, alarm, crossed Amanda's face, but she quickly recovered. "Speaking of Grandpa," she said, her voice taking on a rehearsed, emotional quality, "I still can't believe he's gone. We were so close those last few months." My father nodded solemnly. "Your sister was amazing with him, Brenton. Visited him daily, managed his medications, took him to every doctor's appointment. We don't know what would have happened without her dedication." I took a sip of water, keeping my expression neutral. "That's interesting. In our weekly calls, Grandpa never mentioned Amanda being so involved." A momentary tension fell over the table. Amanda recovered first. "Well, you were so busy with your work. He probably didn't want to bore you with the details of his care." My mother jumped in. "Amanda even took time off work to be with him toward the end. Such a sacrifice." I nodded, filing away these claims against the evidence I'd gathered. "The store employees mentioned seeing you there quite a bit in those final months. That must have been new for you, given how little interest you'd shown in the store previously." Amanda's smile tightened. Someone had to step in. The store was struggling, and Grandpa couldn't manage it anymore. "Speaking of which..." She paused, dramatically waiting until Richard gave her a subtle nod. "I've decided to sell the hardware store. A developer has made an excellent offer to turn the property into a mixed-use development, retail on the bottom, luxury condos above." And there it was. The real reason for this dinner, the news they wanted to deliver in person to watch my reaction. I set down my fork carefully. "The store is profitable," I said. "It's been the anchor of that neighborhood for decades. Grandpa would never have wanted it sold off for condos." Amanda's expression hardened slightly. "Grandpa left the store to me to do what's best for it. The building is old, the business model outdated. This is a smart business decision." "And who is this developer making the offer?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Richard cleared his throat. "Actually, it's my company, Prestige Properties. We've been planning a revitalization project for that block for some time. The hardware store is the final piece we need." Of course. The dinner invitation suddenly made perfect sense. They weren't interested in reconciliation. They wanted to manage my reaction to their plans for the store, perhaps worried I might cause legal troubles. "Some might see that as a conflict of interest," I observed. "The store being left to Amanda, and then immediately sold to her husband's company." It's a fair market offer, Richard said defensively. More than fair, actually. And what about the employees, I asked. Some of them have worked there for 20+ years. Amanda waved a dismissive hand. They'll receive standard severance packages. Really, Brenton, I didn't expect you to be sentimental about this. Isn't disruption what you tech people celebrate? Out with the old, in with the new. My parents were watching this exchange with thinly veiled anxiety. They'd clearly been briefed about this announcement and had prepared for my potential objections. The neighborhood could use some revitalization, my father offered. Property values will increase for everyone. And the condos will bring younger people to the area, my mother added. It's what progress looks like. I looked around at their expectant faces and realized they actually thought I would just accept this, that I would nod and congratulate them on their clever business move even though it meant erasing Grandpa's legacy for their financial gain. The main course arrived, some kind of roast that Amanda made a show of serving herself, playing the perfect hostess. I had lost my appetite entirely, but I served myself a small portion to maintain appearances. As we ate, I could feel the tension building like a storm-gathering force before breaking. This carefully orchestrated dinner was about to veer dramatically off script. You know, Brenton, Amanda said, cutting her meat with precise movements. We've all been wondering why you suddenly care so much about the store or what happens in this town. You left 10 years ago without looking back. You missed birthdays, holidays, graduations. And so it began, the attack I'd been expecting since I arrived. I built a company from nothing, I replied calmly. That requires focus and sacrifice. But I never abandoned Grandpa. We spoke every Sunday for 10 years without fail. My mother scoffed lightly. Phone calls. Anyone can make phone calls. Did you know? I asked, looking directly at her, that Grandpa kept a journal where he recorded all our conversations. He wrote down the projects I was working on, the advice he gave me, the milestones we celebrated together. This was clearly news to them. Amanda's fork paused halfway to her mouth. He never mentioned that, she said. There's a lot he apparently didn't mention, I replied. For instance, he never told me that you had suddenly taken such an interest in his care and the store. And from what I've gathered, you never told him about my success in California. Did you know he thought I was struggling financially all these years? My father shifted uncomfortably in his seat. We didn't want to bother him with details. I set down my silverware. I sent him birthday gifts every year, expensive ones. I offered to fly him out to California multiple times. I sent him brochures for the retirement community near my house where he could have his own cottage, but with medical care on site. All those offers mysteriously never reached him. Amanda's cheeks flushed slightly. He wasn't interested in moving to California. He belonged here with family who could see him in person. Family who spent years barely acknowledging his existence until they realized he was updating his will. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my photos. Here's the Father's Day gift I sent him 2 years ago, a custom-made cabinet for his tool collection. He sent me this picture of it in his workshop. I showed them the photo of Grandpa smiling proudly next to the cabinet. Funny how none of you ever mentioned seeing it. Richard cleared his throat. Look, Brenton, families are complicated. Maybe there were communication issues on both sides. But what matters now is moving forward productively. The hardware store represents a significant asset that Amanda has inherited, and she's making a sound business decision that benefits everyone. Everyone except the employees who lose their jobs, the neighborhood that loses a cornerstone business, and Grandpa who explicitly didn't want the store sold. I turned to Richard. By the way, how long has Prestige Properties been planning this development? The timing seems convenient. Richard's confident smile faltered slightly. We've been assembling properties in that area for several years. It's no secret. And when exactly did you approach Grandpa about selling the store to complete your project? Amanda interjected quickly. Grandpa wasn't interested in selling. He was stubborn about that store even when it made no financial sense to keep it. So you waited until he wasn't around to object anymore, I said quietly. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. My mother attempted to redirect the conversation. Brenton, I think you're being unfair. Your sister has always been responsible and practical. She's making a decision based on what makes financial sense, not on sentimentality. Is that what you call it? Practical, I asked. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like a betrayal of everything Grandpa valued. He built that store from nothing. It supported this family for decades. He employed people from the community, some of whom have nowhere else to go. Amanda's face hardened. You have no right to judge my decisions. You weren't here. You didn't see his decline didn't help with his medications or doctor visits. You were living your glamorous California life, while I dealt with the hard reality of an aging grandparent. Is that what happened? I asked. Because according to the visiting nurse's logs, you rarely showed up until 3 months before he died, right around the time his lawyer mentioned he was updating his will. A tense silence fell over the table. My father was the first to break it. How would you know what the visiting nurse wrote? I've been doing my homework, I replied simply. Interesting timing, isn't it? Amanda suddenly becomes the devoted granddaughter, right when there's an inheritance at stake. Amanda slammed her hand on the table, making the silverware jump. I was there. Where were you? Playing with computers in California while I was managing his medications, his appointments, his finances. Managing his finances so well that you convinced him to change his will on your behalf, I asked coolly. After decades of telling me the store would be mine someday. He changed his mind. Amanda's voice rose sharply. He realized who really cared about him, who really deserved the store. I took a deep breath, maintaining my composure. Did he change his mind, or did you change it for him? The nursing staff mentioned he was quite confused in those final weeks, especially on the day the new will was signed. Richard cut in, his voice stern. You need to be very careful about what you're implying, Brenton. Making accusations about will tampering is serious business. I'm not implying anything, I replied. I'm stating facts. Grandpa was on heavy pain medication. His doctor noted cognitive impairment, and suddenly he completely reverses a decision he'd maintained for decades. People are allowed to change their minds, my mother said defensively, especially when they realize who's truly there for them. Is that what happened, Mom? Or did Amanda see an opportunity and take advantage of a vulnerable old man? Amanda's face flushed with anger. How dare you? I loved Grandpa. Everything I did was for his benefit, including restricting his visitors, monitoring his phone calls, taking control of his bank accounts. I leaned forward. The staff at Sunny Pines Assisted Living were quite forthcoming about your sudden intensive involvement in his care. My father's face had gone pale. You've been investigating us. I've been investigating what happened to Grandpa in his final months, I corrected. And what I found doesn't match the story you're telling. Richard attempted to regain control of the conversation. This is all very dramatic, Brenton, but ultimately irrelevant. The will is legal, it's been executed, and Amanda is now the rightful owner of the store. Whatever arrangements she chooses to make with my company are perfectly legitimate business transactions. Are they? I asked. Because my investigation turned up some interesting emails between you and city planning officials about that development. Emails from 8 months ago, when Grandpa was still alive and had no intention of selling. That mentioned the hardware store property as part of the development plan. Care to explain how you were so confident you'd acquire a property that wasn't for sale? Richard's confident demeanor cracked slightly. He exchanged a quick glance with Amanda before responding. Preliminary planning always considers multiple scenarios and property configurations. It's standard practice in development. Is it also standard practice to date the preliminary drawings for construction before you own the property? I pressed. Because the plans I've seen for Prestige Corner, interesting choice to rename the location, by the way, are dated 2 months before Grandpa died. The room fell silent again. Amanda's hand trembled slightly as she reached for her wine glass. My parents looked increasingly uncomfortable, exchanging worried glances. You've been busy, Amanda, finally said, her voice cold. Conducting your little investigation from afar while we've been here dealing with real life. This is exactly why Grandpa changed his mind about you. You think your tech money gives you the right to swoop in and question decisions made by people who were actually present. I think the truth gives me that right, I replied evenly. And I think Grandpa deserved better than to have his wishes manipulated when he was at his most vulnerable. The dessert plates arrived, an elaborate chocolate creation that nobody touched. The facade of a pleasant family dinner had completely collapsed, revealing the ugliness beneath. As we sat in tense silence, I could see the growing realization in their eyes that I knew far more than they had anticipated. This wasn't going according to their script at all, and Amanda's carefully controlled expression was beginning to crack with each passing moment. Amanda pushed her untouched dessert away, her composure visibly crumbling. The perfect hostess act was gone, replaced by raw emotion that had been simmering beneath the surface all evening. "You always thought you were special, didn't you?" she said, her voice low and dangerous. "Grandpa's favorite. The creative one. The one with potential. Do you have any idea what that was like for me? To work so hard to do everything right and still hear him talk about you constantly?" I stayed silent, letting her continue. This was the real Amanda emerging, the one behind the polished corporate attorney facade. I was valedictorian, full scholarship to an Ivy League school, law review, partnership track at 30. But none of that impressed him like your little computer games. Her voice dripped with resentment. Every time I visited, it was "Brenton called with a new idea," or "Look what Brenton sent me," or "Brenton's company got mentioned in some tech magazine." "I never competed with you, Amanda," I said quietly. "Grandpa was proud of both of us in different ways." Bullshit. The curse word hung in the air, shocking in the formal dining room. He was going to give you everything. The store, the house, his tools, everything that mattered to him. What was I supposed to get? A pat on the head for being a good granddaughter. My father attempted to intervene. "Amanda, maybe this isn't the best." "No," she cut him off. "He needs to hear this. Do you know what Grandpa said to me once? He said, 'Amanda, you'll always land on your feet. But Brenton, he needs the store. It's his legacy.' As if I didn't deserve a legacy too. I looked at my sister, really seeing her for perhaps the first time in years. Behind the anger was something else, pain and security, a lifetime of feeling second best despite her achievements. "I never asked for the store," I said calmly. "I just wanted Grandpa's wishes respected." His wishes, Amanda's laugh was bitter. His wishes were outdated and impractical. That store is a dinosaur. The only value it has is the land it sits on. At least I'm making something useful out of it. "Something profitable, you mean?" I corrected. "For your husband's company. We deserve it." Amanda's voice rose sharply. "After everything we've dealt with here while you were playing entrepreneur in California, you have no idea what it's been like. The expectations, the responsibilities. You just walked away and reinvented yourself while we stayed and followed the rules." "The rules," I echoed. "Is that what you call manipulating a confused old man into changing his will, following the rules?" Something snapped in Amanda then. She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. "You entitled, self-righteous bastard," she hissed. "You don't deserve anything from Grandpa. You abandoned him. You abandoned all of us. And now you waltz back in here with your Silicon Valley success and your moral superiority." I remained seated, maintaining my calm. "I just want the truth, Amanda, about what really happened in those final months." What happened next shocked everyone. Amanda circled the table in 3 quick strides, drew back her hand, and slapped me hard across the face. The sharp crack echoed in the dining room. "You have 10 minutes to leave my house," she snarled, her face inches from mine. "Take your accusations and your investigations and get out." I touched my cheek, feeling the sting of her ring where it had caught my skin. The dining room fell into stunned silence, but only for a moment. Then, to my utter disbelief, my parents began to laugh. My father actually clapped his hands together in apparent approval of Amanda's outburst. "About time someone put him in his place," my father said, nodding with satisfaction. My mother joined in. "Did you really think you could come here and question us? After abandoning your family for a decade?" Richard was smirking now, looking at his watch. 10 minutes seems generous, honestly. I'd have said 5. I sat there, surrounded by my blood relatives, feeling more alone than I ever had in my life. The unified front of hostility was stunning in its intensity. Whatever family bond had once existed was clearly gone, replaced by something ugly and transactional. But as the initial shock faded, a strange calm settled over me. This moment of naked hostility had clarified everything. There was no misunderstanding to resolve, no relationship to salvage, just the truth to be revealed. I slowly reached down for my briefcase beside my chair. Amanda misinterpreted the movement as compliance with her demand to leave. "That's right," she sneered. "Run away like you always do. Back to your perfect California life." I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I placed the briefcase on the table, unlatched it deliberately, and removed a thick file folder. With calm precision, I slammed it down on the dinner table, causing the crystal glasses to rattle. My family's expressions shifted from triumphant disdain to confusion as I looked up at Amanda, a small smile forming on my lips. "Then you all only have 5 minutes," I said quietly. The dining room fell silent as they stared at the thick file folder now sitting among the half-eaten desserts and wine glasses. Amanda was the first to recover her expression, shifting from rage to uncertainty. "What is that supposed to be?" she demanded, though her voice had lost some of its edge. I opened the folder with deliberate slowness. "This is the result of 6 months of investigation into Grandpa's final days and the suspicious circumstances surrounding his revised will." Richard scoffed, but I noticed he'd straightened in his chair, suddenly alert. "Investigation. What are you playing, detective, now?" "Not playing," I replied calmly. "I hired Thornton & Associates, one of the top investigative firms in the country. They specialize in elder abuse and probate fraud cases." My mother's face paled. "Elder abuse. That's ridiculous. We loved your grandfather." "Love and exploitation aren't mutually exclusive, Mom." I began laying out documents on the table. "Let's start with the will itself." I had handwriting experts analyze Grandpa's signature. Their conclusion: while it appears to be his signature, it shows signs consistent with being guided by another hand, what they call a assisted signature. Amanda crossed her arms defensively. "He was weak. I helped steady his hand. There's nothing illegal about that." "Interesting you knew exactly what I was referring to," I noted. "But let's continue. Here are the medical records from the 2 weeks prior to the will signing." I spread out several pages of hospital records, highlighting key sections. Grandpa was on a significant dose of morphine for pain, along with other medications known to cause confusion and cognitive impairment. His nurses documented increasing confusion, noting specifically that he often confused present-day events with memories from decades ago. My father leaned forward, attempting to gather the papers. "This is private medical information. You have no right." I pulled the documents back. Actually, as his grandson and someone with legitimate concerns about elder exploitation, I do have rights, especially when pursuing a legal case. Richard's attorney instincts kicked in. "Legal case? You're bluffing." "Am I?" I pulled out another document. This is a sworn statement from Marie Jenkins, Grandpa's primary nurse. She testifies that on the day the will was signed, Grandpa was particularly confused, believing at times that he was back in his 30s. She also notes that Amanda instructed her not to administer his morning cognitive medication, supposedly to let him rest, but coincidentally timed exactly with the lawyer's visit. Amanda's face had lost all color. That's not what happened." "No. Then how do you explain this?" I produced another document. "This is security camera footage from Sunny Pines, showing you entering and exiting Grandpa's room multiple times on the day the will was signed. The timestamps are interesting. You arrived 2 hours before the lawyer left, shortly after he arrived, then returned again after he departed." Richard placed a restraining hand on Amanda's arm as she started to speak. "Careful," he warned her quietly. I continued relentlessly. "I also have statements from 3 of Grandpa's friends who were suddenly unable to visit him in those final months. According to them, you claimed he was too tired for visitors or sleeping whenever they came by. Strangely, this started immediately after his first mention of updating his will." My mother's hands were trembling. "This is just circumstantial. You can't prove anything. Perhaps this will help then." I produced a small digital recorder. Grandpa was old-fashioned in many ways, but he embraced technology when it was useful. Including this voice recorder, I gave him 3 years ago to record his thoughts and memories for a family history project. I pressed play, and Grandpa's familiar voice filled the dining room. April 3rd. Amanda visited again today. Third time this week, which is unusual. She brought up the store again, saying I should consider planning for its future. When I mentioned my long-standing arrangement to leave it to Brenton, she got quite upset. Said he'd probably sell it immediately since he lives in California now. That's not the Brenton I know. He loves that store almost as much as I do. He's got all these ideas for updating the inventory system and adding an online store. Smart boy, my Brenton. I stopped the recording and looked at their shocked faces. There are several more entries like this documenting Amanda's increasing pressure about the will and the store, including one from just days before the new will was signed, where he sounds confused about why he's being asked to change his plans for the store. Richard had gone completely still, his legal mind clearly calculating the implications. Amanda looked on the verge of tears, not from remorse, I suspected, but from seeing her carefully constructed plan disintegrating. But wait, there's more. I continued, pulling out another document. This is particularly interesting. Financial records showing that Prestige Properties, Richard's company, is carrying significant debt with several projects underwater. In fact, according to these loan documents, there's a balloon payment coming due next month that you don't have the liquidity to cover. Without a cash infusion from, say, selling a valuable commercial property, Prestige would likely face bankruptcy. Richard's face contorted with anger. Those are confidential business records. How did you get those? Legally, I assure you. Public Records requests court filings, standard financial intelligence gathering. I turned back to Amanda. So it seems both of you had a powerful financial motive to ensure the store came to you rather than me. My parents sat in stunned silence, their earlier bravado completely evaporated. And speaking of financial motives, I continued, let's talk about the development plans themselves. I pulled out architectural drawings. These plans, dated 2 months before Grandpa died, clearly show the hardware store property as part of the Prestige Corner development. Care to explain how you were so confident you'd acquire a property that wasn't for sale and that Grandpa had repeatedly refused to sell? Amanda's lawyer instincts finally kicked in. This is all circumstantial. You can't prove intent. Perhaps this will help. I produced a final document, an email printout. This is an email from Richard to your company's project manager dated 3 months before Grandpa died. It reads, and I quote, Amanda says the old man is finally weakening on the store issue. Once we get control of the property, we can move forward with phase 2 as planned. Keep the drawings ready. Richard's face went from red to ashen. That's taken out of context. Is it? Because the context seems pretty clear from where I'm sitting. I began gathering the documents back into the folder. I've submitted all of this evidence to the district attorney's office. They're particularly interested in the elder abuse and fraud aspects. The DA mentioned that financial elder abuse cases are a priority for them right now. Amanda finally found her voice. You're bluffing. You wouldn't do this to your own family. I looked at her steadily. You stopped being family to me the moment you took advantage of a confused, dying old man who trusted you. You betrayed not just me, but everything Grandpa stood for. Honesty, integrity, community. I closed the folder with a soft but final click. The investigation is already underway. I received confirmation yesterday that they're proceeding with the case. Expect official contact tomorrow morning. The silence in the dining room was absolute. In the space of 15 minutes, their world had completely changed. The smug certainty was gone, replaced by the dawning realization that actions have consequences, consequences that were now bearing down on them with the full force of the law. Amanda lunged across the table, desperately reaching for the file. Give me that you have no right. I calmly pulled the folder out of her reach, tucking it back into my briefcase. Everything in this file has already been submitted to the authorities and my attorneys. This is just my personal copy. Richard stood up, attempting to regain his composure and take control of the situation. Look, Brenton, there's clearly been a misunderstanding. Perhaps we've all been a bit hasty. A misunderstanding? I raised an eyebrow. You conspired to manipulate a dying man, forged documents, and attempted to steal his legacy. That's not a misunderstanding. That's criminal behavior. My father finally found his voice. Son, maybe we can work something out. Family should handle things privately. Like you handled Grandpa's final days privately, I shook my head. It's far too late for that. Amanda's desperation was growing visibly. Her perfectly composed image had completely shattered, revealing the panic beneath. You don't understand our situation. We've had financial setbacks. Richard's development deals fell through. We needed this. So you decided to steal from Grandpa, to betray his trust. I kept my voice calm despite my anger. There were 1,000 other options. You could have asked for help. You could have been honest. Richard placed a restraining hand on Amanda's shoulder. Let's all calm down and approach this rationally. I'm sure we can come to an arrangement that satisfies everyone. His voice had taken on the smooth negotiating tone he probably used in business deals. What would it take to make this go away, Brenton? A share of the property, a consulting role in the development. I looked at him with disbelief. You still don't get it. This isn't a negotiation. The DA has the evidence. The probate court has been petitioned. This isn't something you can buy your way out of. Richard's face hardened. Everyone has a price. Not everyone, I replied. And certainly not me. I don't need your money. What I want is justice for Grandpa. My mother began to cry soft, manipulative sobs that had worked on me many times in childhood. Think about what this will do to the family, Brenton. The scandal, the shame. Your sister could lose her law license. Is that what you want? What I wanted was for my grandfather's wishes to be respected, I said firmly. What I wanted was to honor his legacy. You all made that impossible. Amanda's strategy shifted abruptly from aggression to bargaining. We could split everything, 50-50. You can have half the proceeds from the sale, or even keep the store if that's what you want. We can tear up the development plans. Again, not my decision anymore, I explained patiently. The legal process has begun, but even if it hadn't, do you really think I'd trust any agreement with you at this point? The reality of their situation was finally sinking in. Richard had moved away from Amanda, physically distancing himself as though her problems might be contagious. My father was staring blankly at the wall, and my mother continued her ineffective crying. When Amanda asked quietly, "When will they come?" "The DA's office said they'd be in contact tomorrow morning," I replied. "I imagine they'll want to interview each of you separately." Richard immediately pulled out his phone. "I need to call my attorney." "That would be wise," I agreed. Amanda's face suddenly contorted with rage again. "You've ruined everything. Do you have any idea what this will do to us, to our reputation in this town? Perhaps you should have considered that before you decided to take advantage of a vulnerable old man," I suggested. "You sanctimonious bastard," she hissed. "You think you're so perfect. You left. You abandoned this family for 10 years, and now you swoop in to play the avenging grandson. Where were you when Grandpa needed daily care, when he couldn't remember to take his medications?" "I offered to hire full-time care," I reminded her. "I offered to move him to a high-end retirement community near me. You blocked every suggestion because it didn't fit your narrative or your plans for the store." My father finally spoke up, his voice defeated. "Can't we keep this private? Handle it within the family?" "That opportunity passed the moment you decided to participate in elder abuse and fraud," I said firmly. "Besides, this isn't just about our family. It's about the store employees who would lose their livelihoods, the community that would lose a cornerstone business, and most importantly, about Grandpa's wishes." Amanda made one last desperate attempt. "The media will have a field day with this. Prominent attorney charged with elder abuse. Is that what you want? Your own sister humiliated publicly." "What I want doesn't matter anymore," I replied. "The evidence has been submitted. The process has begun. You'll have your day in court to defend yourselves, but I wouldn't count on sympathy from a jury when they hear how you treated your own grandfather." The fight seemed to drain out of Amanda all at once. She sank back into her chair, suddenly looking much older. "It wasn't supposed to be like this," she whispered. "We just needed a solution." The debts kept piling up. The house, the cars, the kids' private schools. We were drowning. For the first time that evening, I felt a flicker of pity for my sister. Not enough to change course, but enough to recognize the desperate circumstances that had driven her actions, if not excuse them. Richard, meanwhile, had moved completely into self-preservation mode. I need to make it clear that I was not directly involved in any decisions regarding the will he announced to the room. My involvement was strictly limited to the potential property development after acquisition. Amanda's head snapped up betrayal written across her face. Richard. He wouldn't meet her eyes. I'm just stating the facts, Amanda. I wasn't present during any meetings with your grandfather about his will. The speed with which he was distancing himself from his wife was breathtaking. My parents, too, were looking increasingly uncomfortable, as though calculating their own potential liability. You all might want to get your stories straight before tomorrow, I suggested, standing and picking up my briefcase. The DA mentioned they're particularly interested in who knew what and when. That set off a new wave of panicked glances between them. The unified front they had presented earlier had completely dissolved, replaced by individual self-interest. I buttoned my suit jacket and prepared to leave. There was nothing more to be said or done here. The legal process would take its course now. I'd say it's been a pleasure, but we all know better, I said, moving toward the door. I suggest you all call your attorneys tonight. You're going to need them. As I walked out of the dining room, nobody tried to stop me. The only sound was Richard's urgent whisper to someone on his phone and my mother's quiet sobbing. The elaborate family dinner meant to manage and intimidate me had become the moment their carefully constructed deception fell apart. The weeks following that dramatic dinner were a whirlwind of legal proceedings, community reaction, and personal reflection. As I had warned, the district attorney moved quickly, interviewing all parties involved and filing formal charges against Amanda for elder abuse, fraud, and undue influence. Richard wasn't charged directly with the will tampering, but faced separate investigations into unethical business practices related to the planned development. The community reaction was swift and unified. Grandpa had been beloved in our town, and as word spread about what had happened, support for preserving his legacy grew. A Save Carpenter's Corner campaign sprouted organically, with longtime customers sharing stories about how Grandpa had helped them over the decades, extending credit during hard times, teaching young homeowners how to make basic repairs, donating supplies to community projects. Amanda's reputation collapsed virtually overnight. The law firm where she was on track for partnership placed her on indefinite leave pending the outcome of the criminal case. Their statement emphasized their zero-tolerance policy for ethical violations, a clear attempt to distance themselves from the scandal. Richard filed for divorce within 2 weeks, a transparent attempt to protect his assets and salvage what remained of his business reputation. His company, Prestige Properties, lost several investors and had projects put on hold as clients reconsidered their associations. My parents retreated from public view, embarrassed by their complicity. They made several attempts to contact me, leaving voicemails that evolved from angry accusations to tearful apologies as the full scope of evidence against Amanda became public. I wasn't ready to speak with them yet, perhaps not for a very long time. The probate court moved with surprising efficiency, likely influenced by the criminal investigation. The fraudulent will was invalidated, and Grandpa's previous will was reinstated, the one that left the hardware store to me, just as he had always intended. Taking possession of Carpenter's Corner was a bittersweet moment. As I unlocked the front door with my own key for the first time, I was flooded with memories of working alongside Grandpa, learning from him, being shaped by his values and work ethic. The store smelled exactly the same, a comforting mixture of wood metal and the peppermint candies Grandpa always kept by the register. My first act as owner was to gather the employees, many of whom had worked there for decades, and assure them their jobs were secure. Not only secure, but we would be expanding, implementing many of the modernization ideas Grandpa and I had discussed over the years. An online store to complement the brick-and-mortar business, an expanded workshop area for classes and demonstrations, a tool lending library for community members who couldn't afford to purchase expensive equipment for one-time projects. Grandpa always said this store was built to serve the community, not just to make a profit. I told them at that first meeting, that's not changing. If anything, we're doubling down on that mission. The relief and gratitude on their faces was worth more than any financial success, These people had been Grandpa's extended family, and now they were becoming mine as well. Healing from the betrayal of my blood relatives took longer. There were nights I lay awake replaying that dinner, seeing again the naked hostility on their faces, hearing Amanda's cruel words, and the shocking sound of my parents' laughter after she slapped me. Family is supposed to be your foundation, your safety net. Having that illusion shattered so completely left wounds that wouldn't heal quickly or easily. But as the months passed, I found new connections forming. The store employees and their families invited me to barbecues and holiday gatherings. Longtime customers stopped by just to chat, sharing stories about Grandpa I'd never heard. I found myself building a chosen family, one based on shared values and genuine affection rather than mere DNA. The criminal case against Amanda was eventually resolved through a plea agreement. She avoided jail time, but received probation community service and was disbarred. The last I heard, she had moved out of state, attempting to rebuild her life away from the scandal. Richard's company declared bankruptcy, and he too left town reputation in tatters. My parents made repeated attempts at reconciliation, but I maintained my distance. Perhaps someday I would be ready to hear their explanations, their apologies. But not yet. Some betrayals cut too deep for quick forgiveness. As for me, I found an unexpected peace in splitting my time between California and my hometown. I maintained my tech company but shifted to a more balanced approach to work and life. The hardware store thrived under the blend of traditional service and modern business practices. Grandpa would have loved seeing his old customers alongside young homeowners taking DIY classes or using the new design software to plan their projects. The greatest lesson from this painful chapter wasn't about business success or even justice being served. It was about the true meaning of family and legacy. Grandpa understood something my parents and sister never grasped, that a legacy isn't just about property or money. It's about values, about how you treat people, about the impact you have on your community. In the end, standing up for what's right, even against your own blood relatives, can be the hardest and most necessary thing you'll ever do. True family is defined by love, respect, and shared values, not merely by genetics. Sometimes you have to lose what you thought was family to find your real one. I often think about that dinner, that moment when Amanda slapped me and delivered her ultimatum, expecting me to crumble. Instead, it became the moment I found my strength and purpose. Sometimes the greatest gifts come disguised as painful moments of truth. Have you ever had to stand up against family for what's right? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories about finding strength in difficult moments. And if you know someone struggling with family betrayal or difficult decisions, share this with them. Sometimes knowing others have walked similar paths can be incredibly healing. Thank you for listening to my story. Remember, the family you choose can be stronger than the family you're born into.